Welcome to Days of Roar, the Detroit Tiger podcast, brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorash. I am here with Detroit Tigers beat writer, Free Press beat writer, Evan Petzold, fresh off a trip to San Antonio and a very late night watching the Detroit Lions win yet again, which is just never too hard to take. But we're here today to discuss some baseball. Ev, how was San Antonio?
San Antonio was great. The general manager meetings took place last week from Monday to Thursday at the JW Marriott Resort and Spa in San Antonio. Tigers president of baseball operations, Scott Harris, talked to reporters for an hour Tuesday. Super agent Scott Boras talked to reporters for an hour Wednesday. Aside from that, there were other executives and agents crawling all over the hotel, so I spent my week talking to a whole lot of people. Aside from Harris, general manager Jeff Greenberg, assistant general manager Sam Menzin, assistant general manager Ryan Garko, and senior advisor to the president Scott Bream. All four of those guys plus Harris represented the Tigers at the GM meetings. Yes, Scott Bream's role has changed from vice president of player personnel to senior advisor to the president. That promotion happened in June 2024, 2 months after the Tigers promoted Ryan Garko from vice president of player development to assistant general manager in May 2024. But unlike Garko's promotion, Bream's promotion went unannounced by the Tigers. So congrats to Scott Bream. And if we forgot to mention it during the summer, congrats to Ryan Garko. Now, the big national news coming out of the GM meetings, Juan Soto scheduled to meet with New York Yankees owner Hal Steinbrenner and New York Mets owner Steve Cohen. Sounds like those meetings are happening within the next week in Southern California. Aside from the Yankees and the Mets, teams like the Toronto Blue Jays, Los Angeles Dodgers, San Francisco Giants, Boston Red Sox, Tampa Bay Rays, those are the teams that are showing interest in Juan Soto. But the meetings with the New York teams, that kind of got me thinking, Mike Ilitch, the late Tigers owner, he used to meet with free agents and convince them to play in Detroit all the time. And I wonder if Chris Ilitch will ever do that, or if the Tigers will ever be in the market for a Soto-priced player. From what I've heard, Chris hasn't ever done what Steinbrenner and Cohen are doing right now. Like, wouldn't it be fun to talk about Chris taking a flight across the country in his private jet to meet up with Juan Soto and try to convince him to become a Tiger? That would be a lot of fun. But anyway, the travel plans of Hal and Steve, those have been the hot topics in baseball for the last week, along with Roki Sasaki, the young top pitcher in Japan, coming to MLB in 2025, as he will be posted by the Chiba Lotte Marines of the Nippon Professional Baseball League. Maybe we'll talk more about Sasaki later in the offseason. He's going to be posted as an international free agent and sign a minor league contract because of his age, rather than a regular free agent who signs this massive contract like Yoshinobu Yamamoto did last offseason. So that means all 30 teams could be in the mix. A lot of people are saying Dodgers, but again, the 29 other teams could make a run at him too because he's not going to sign for a big contract. As for Juan Soto, I've heard 10 years, $500 million is the floor for his contract. I would guess the magic number for him is $700 million. But I think he probably gets like $600 million over 13 years. He's coming off his age 25 season. So a 13-year deal takes him through his age 38 season. I don't expect him to sign anytime soon, but if the right offer is on the table, never say never. It was an action-packed GM meetings, a lot's going on, and it was a lot of fun.
All right, so first let's get the fun part out of the way. Juan Soto, team, number of years, money. I'll go first for you. New York Mets, 13 years, $625 million. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I think he probably gets $600 million over 13 years. So not as much in the AAV as you, but pretty much the same. And I'm going to go Los Angeles Dodgers because the Los Angeles Dodgers are the Los Angeles Dodgers. I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but could you imagine? I mean, could you imagine if they had Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Roki Sasaki, Juan Soto, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts? Like, that's an invincible team. I think it'd be a lot of fun. The other 29 teams wouldn't think the same, but we'll go Juan Soto to the Dodgers for 600 over 13 years.
By the way, did we announce that I've been named senior vice president, senior advisor to the president, Evan Petzold? Did we tell everybody that that's my title now?
I don't think so. We let that one slip.
See, yeah, it's kind of like what happened with Bream. Bream and I, we have things to talk about. All right. So what other kind of rumors were floating around? And let me just say, NFL free agency is an absolute blast. NBA free agency is just the chaos that we all love as fans. And MLB free agency is like they pump the entire room with some type of gas that makes everyone go to sleep. I can't imagine a sport who gets less mileage and less publicity and less excitement out of their free agency window than Major League Baseball. They need to do something about it. It sucks. So, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, let's jump right into question one of the big two. I mean, I want to give you my biggest takeaway from the GM meetings. You're right. It is slow. It does take a lot of time. Nobody has signed yet, and it might be a little bit before anybody signs. But my biggest takeaway from the GM meetings, which is question one of the big two, so far, the Tigers have not prioritized third baseman Alex Bregman. And that's a really big deal for me because that was somebody that I went into the offseason wondering, okay, are the Tigers going to make Alex Bregman their number one priority? And so far, they have not prioritized him at all. Now, you're right. It's still early. This moves very, very slowly. So anything can happen. Never say never. But at the same time, they haven't prioritized him yet. And there are other teams that have prioritized Alex Bregman. He projects to receive a 6-year, $160 million contract, but the total value of the contract could reach $200 million. It just depends on how his market unfolds. The Houston Astros are extremely motivated to retain Bregman, and they may have already made an offer. He is their number one priority, and right now the Tigers are watching everything unfold from the sidelines as they don't seem interested in signing free agent players to contracts beyond 4 or 5 years. If Bregman's market crashes, I could totally see the Tigers jumping in late, but again, this is Alex Bregman. I don't expect his market to crash. Plus, he probably already has an offer on the table from the Astros, so if his market somehow crashes, he's just going to go back to the Astros. It's still early, but I would put the odds of the Tigers landing Bregman at very low. But again, it's early. Like, I don't want to, get too far ahead of myself. But at the same time, they're not prioritizing him early on. That's a big red flag if you want the Tigers to sign Alex Bregman. Now, there's a lot to like about him. He hit 260 with a 798 OPS over 461 games in the last 3 seasons, averaging 154 games per year. He has an 11.1% walk rate and a 12.2% strikeout rate in that stretch. So it's elite plate discipline, smart swing decisions. He has a good relationship with Tigers manager AJ Hinch, who I'm sure has already reached out to Bregman in the past week or so. Remember, Hinch and Bregman, they were together with the Astros from 2016 to 2019, and they won the World Series together in 2017. Alex Bregman also plays third base and is a right-handed hitter. The Tigers need a right-handed hitter, and after 2 seasons without an established third baseman, wouldn't it be nice to have some stability at the hot corner? We haven't had that in Detroit since Jeimer Candelario in 2022, and Alex Bregman's a really, really good third baseman, and he's open to playing second base, which would work if the Tigers ever decide to move Colt Keith to first base. He also has postseason experience, 99 playoff games in his career, winning 2 World Series. But I think the Tigers have some concerns about Alex Bregman. He's on the other side of 30, turning 31 in late March. He underwent surgery to remove a bone chip in his right elbow after the season. I think that's a point of concern for the Tigers from a long-term standpoint. Is there more damage in the elbow? How is that going to hold up over a 6-year deal, let's just say? It's also the factor of declining power. Alex Bregman hit 31 home runs in 2018 and 41 home runs in 2019. He has averaged just 25 home runs per season over the past 3 seasons. And for some perspective on that, he would have averaged 22 homers per season if he played all of his games at Comerica Park. Playing in the cold weather at the spacious Comerica Park, which is nicknamed Comerica National Park, it's a lot different than playing indoors at Minute Maid Park with the short Crawford boxes in left field. So and also, by the way, on top of that, any team, such as the Tigers, will project ahead. Not what have you gotten from Alex Bregman, but what will you get from Alex Bregman, say in his age 33, 34, 35, 36 seasons. So we're looking at 2027 to 2030. We know what he's done so far in the first 9 years of his MLB career, but we don't know what he's going to do in the next 6 years as he gets closer to age 40. A lot can change in 6 years. He's still hitting the ball hard right now, but if that gives, and he's at Comerica Park, he could plummet to being a 10 to 15 homer per season type guy. Yes, there's still a lot that's great about what he does at the plate. He provides a good defense, and he is an elite leader. He's a clubhouse-changing type leader. But long story short, I don't think the Tigers are as interested in Alex Bregman as we thought they might be. Yes, it's still early, but they haven't prioritized him yet. That was my biggest takeaway from the Tigers at the GM meetings.
All right. So I got a few takes on this. First of all, much to the chagrin of me and of Scott Harris, I have now learned how to speak Scott Harris. It took 3 years. It's been something I've had to discuss with my therapist. It's not pleasant. But the bottom line is Scott Harris is the guy at the poker table who absolutely never, ever shows his hand. He never works the PR aspect of anything, and anything he's doing, you will never know. Ever, never, ever, never. Why? Don't know. Don't really care, but whatever Scott Harris is doing, you're never going to know what he's doing, okay? And I would never trust a thing that he says. He thinks he's being savvy in the PR way, but I think whatever he's going to do, he's got a plan. He thinks his plan is the greatest plan there ever was created, and he's got an idea about what to do. At the same time, when it comes to certain things, and especially all things Alex Bregman, I think a lot of times the last decision, and Scott Harris is taking instructions from A.J. Hinch. And as long as the price is not unreasonable and unnecessarily risky in terms of years and money, A.J. Hinch is definitely going to have a lot of input on, in my mind, whether the Detroit Tigers pursue Alex Bregman. We can discuss the power, and I had my friend Jerry Makinen, who's just an awesome data human, and I'm sure you may see this published in a few places, maybe even the Free Press soon, run a bunch of charts showing every fly ball that both Alex Bregman and Christian Walker hit in 2024. Alex Bregman lost one home run to Comerica Park. So the idea that it would diminish his power is nonsense.
But how many will he lose in 2027, 2028, 2029, and 2030?
Well, look, as a man who's 68 years old, I don't know if I'll be alive in 2027 to render a decision, but at the same time, I have a few questions for you. Is Tarik Skubal going to be a Tiger in 2027?
It's a great question. We'll have to wait and see.
Riley Green would be in the last year of his contract in 2027. So what's the future for Riley Green after 2027?
Yeah, Riley Green would actually be in his second to last year of his contract. The final year of Riley Green's contract is going to be 2028. That'll be his final season for Riley Green as a Tiger unless he signs a contract extension, just to put that out there.
I got a different question for you. How many general managers have been, of winning teams, have been the GM of that team greater than 7 years?
It would take quite a bit of research to find that out.
Less than 5. So my answer is, why is Scott Harris worrying about year 5 and 6 of a 6-year contract or a 7-year contract? There's probably a 90% likelihood he's not the general manager of the Detroit Tigers. So my answer is, you have a window. It's about a 3-year window. You better do things to optimize your team to win.
See, but it's not a 3-year window. It's a 2-year window. If you really think about it, it is a 2-year window. You have Tarik Skubal, the best pitcher in the world, for 2 more years. And that's the big question that the Tigers are going to have to answer. And it seems like they've already had the answer, right? Like they're not prioritizing Alex Bregman. We'll see if that changes. But the fact of the matter is Tarik Skubal is under team control for 2 more seasons. And then he's going to become a free agent. Okay. And if you're not going to lock him up and sign him to an extension and you're not going to trade him, you better do everything you can to win in the next 2 years. And I understand that Max Clark is coming, and Kevin McGonigal is coming, and Thayron Liranzo is coming, and Jose Briceño is coming. They're coming soon, but they are not coming in 2025. So you got 2 years. You got 2025 and you got 2026 with Tarik Skubal on the roster, the best pitcher in the world. That's a predicament that the Tigers are facing right now. Do you go out and do you put all the chips in the middle to win in these next 2 years, or do you take a more patient approach? And it seems like they're taking the more patient approach. We'll see if they deviate from that, but that's how it seems right now coming out of the GM meetings.
Now, let me add something depressing to that discussion, which is the Tigers have had 2 of their most advanced, best looking, most productive minor league hitters in the last 30 years come to the big league team in the last 3 years. Riley Green, Colt Keith. My question to you is, as great a minor league hitters as they were, as advanced approach as both of them had, how did they both hit as rookies? And did they have a ton of ups and downs in their rookie years, even though they were great, polished minor league hitters? And the answer to that question is, hell yes, they did. They struggled like crazy.
But that's the thing, too, is a lot of teams overvalue their farm systems, and the Tigers could be in that situation right now where they're overvaluing the future value of Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal and Thayron Liranzo and Jose Briseño. Like, they could be overvaluing those types of players from a future value standpoint. I mean, those guys are still in Class A. They got to get through AA and AAA, and then they got to get to the big leagues. And not only do they have to get to the big leagues, they got to perform in the big leagues. So that's a lot easier said than done. You can't bank on all four of those guys to be all-stars because they're just not all going to be all-stars. Like, it just doesn't work that way. So I think I get your point, and I'm right there with you. Like, I don't think you can just bank on these guys all being good and the Tigers are going to be elite in 2027, 2028, when Riley Green is on the final year of his initial contract. It's not as easy as that. So, I mean, we'll see how they go about it. But again, like I said, the vibe that I've gotten from a lot of people that I've talked to is that the Tigers are going to be pretty patient this offseason. They're going to continue to try to build for the long term, and they're not prioritizing Alex Bregman. That was my big takeaway from the GM meetings.
All right. So, once again, we can only make assumptions, and I'm going to patiently wait and see what they do. History tells us Scott Harris does not like to sign free agents that involve years. He does not like to make trades that add to the core at the major league level. We'll see if there's a change in that. He did allude in a scrum with the national media that this winter things will change. We'll see if the proof is in the pudding. All right, let's move on to question 2 of the big 2. One executive at the GM meetings mentioned Jake Burger, Miami third baseman, first baseman, as a potential trade target for the Detroit Tigers. What do we think about that, Ev?
So I don't love it, but I also don't hate it. And I don't have a mock trade for Jake Burger. I don't think it would cost the Tigers a lot in prospects because the Miami Marlins are rebuilding and they desperately need to add more prospects to their organization. The Marlins are not going to be good until 2027, 2028 at the earliest. And Jake Burger's under team control through the 2028 season. So the Marlins window might just be starting to creep open as Jake Burger is getting ready to become a free agent. So that would be a player that they probably could part ways with to get younger players into their organization. So we'll see how that goes. But Burger is a right-handed hitter who turns 29 in mid-April. He hit .250 with 29 home runs and a .760 OPS in 137 games in the 2024 season. He split time at first base and third base on defense, so there's versatility there. What I like about Jake Burger, again, under team control through the 2028 season. He's not even arbitration eligible yet, so he's dirt cheap, making roughly the MLB minimum. That's only $760,000 in 2025. The Tigers could take the Tampa Bay Rays method with him. Keep him until he gets expensive in arbitration, so until he's like 31 years old, then trade him for whatever you can get in prospect capital to help replenish the farm system. But right now, this guy is a real MLB hitter who blends contact and power. His homer total ranks 17th, and his OPS ranks 37th among 118 qualified hitters over the past 2 seasons. This guy is pretty much what you hoped Spencer Torkelson would be, hitting .250 with 30 homers. He also plays first base and third base. The Tigers could use help at both positions. The question you have to ask yourself in this situation is, do you trust the platoon combination of Matt Vierling and Jace Young at third base? I say no, because Jace Young is not very good at third base, on defense at least, and Matt Vierling isn't much better. And do you trust Spencer Torkelson at first base? My answer to that is no, not as an everyday player. I do like his bat against left-handed pitchers and against certain right-handed pitchers. And I think there's also general upside still with Spencer Torkelson. But as an everyday player, I'm not all about him playing first base on a day-to-day basis. So you trade for a guy like Jake Burger, and here's what it would do. It would keep Matt Vierling in the outfield, creating a 4-man outfield of Riley Green, Parker Meadows, Kerry Carpenter, and Matt Vierling. It would keep Jace Young and Spencer Torkelson on the MLB roster to continue their development, but without the pressure of needing to be everyday players because Berger plays third base and first base. The most important thing is it gives AJ Hinch another piece for his managerial chess match. Let's not forget, if the Tigers want to win in the margins, is there any better way to win in the margins than to let Hinch play the matchup game as much as possible? I know AJ Hinch would love a set it and forget it lineup like he had with the Astros. What manager wouldn't? But he's the best manager in baseball at playing the chess match. So shouldn't the Tigers lean into what makes Hinch better than every other manager in baseball? Or should they give him a roster that 80-year-old Tony La Russa could manage? Like, I think AJ Hinch playing the chess match is one of the best ways to find wins in the margins. I'm not advocating for not spending in that way, but I'm just saying, like, it's an interesting way to consider things when you have a manager who's as tactically savvy as AJ Hinch is. And so with Jake Berger, there would be so many different combinations. You could do Berger at first base, Young at third base, Carp at DH, Vierling in right field, Torque on the bench. Berger at first base, Vierling at third base, Carp in right field, Torque at first base, and Young on the bench. You could have Berger at third base, Torque at first base, Jace Young at DH because he's not a very good third baseman on defense, Carp in right field, Vierling on the bench. Like, the defensive versatility also keeps the door wide open for Jose Briseño and any other corner infielders in the future. All those combinations that I just mentioned, you could swap out Torkelson for Briseño and it still works. So I think with Berger, the corner infield prospects aren't blocked. You can still let Torkelson and you can let Jace Young develop and see if they develop into anything specifically with the bat. The one thing I don't like about Jake Berger is it's just not a sexy name. And by that, I mean it's not Christian Walker. But Jake Berger would make the Tigers a better team in 2025, and he'd be pretty cheap too.
All right. So Jake Berger, here's the bad. Not a very good defender, especially at third base, but neither is Matt Vierling. And I think I've made my feelings about Jace Young as a third baseman.
Yeah, he's better than Jace Young at third base for sure.
No doubt. Jace Young is a second baseman playing third base. Let's be very clear about that. All right. So he also doesn't walk a ton, and he swings and misses an absolute ton. All right. Now, let me ask you a few different questions hypothetically. If I told you somebody that had a 279, 339, 562 slash line in the second half of 2024 for a 901 OPS and a 283 ISO, and the Tigers were interested in dealing for him, how would you feel about that?
Sounds pretty good to me.
Oh, yeah. All right. So he had a 143 WRC plus in the second half of the year. In the last 3 half seasons, he's had over a 120 WRC plus twice. Okay. He also had a 123 WRC plus with runners in scoring position and hit 303, 383, 429. He slashed 303, 383, 429 with runners in scoring position. He also hits the ball out of the ballpark. All right. So my answer about Jake Berger, once I did a dive on what Jake Berger was, is when are we dealing for him? Because he makes the team better. He plays third and first. And let's address something, because I've seen people discuss this in the worst place to discuss baseball in the world, X. But let's be clear about this. And if you aren't listening to what's being said by really, really smart baseball people like Mike Farron and AJ Hinch, here's the deal. The Tigers have 4 outfielders. Their names are Riley Green, Parker Meadows, Kerry Carpenter, and Wenceel Perez. Those are the Tigers' 4 outfielders. Matt Vierling, yeah, he's going to play some outfield, but he's the 5th outfielder. He's not the 4th outfielder. Does Scott Harris love him some Matt Vierling, Evan Petzold? Why don't you give me 30 seconds on the answer to that?
Don't need 30 seconds. I just need one. Yes.
Okay. But guess who makes out the lineup every day? AJ Hinch. Guess who doesn't make out the lineup every day? Scott Harris.
So does that mean we have to blame AJ Hinch for Matt Vierling hitting third in the playoffs?
Yes, we do. But at the same time, understand something. Matt Vierling's probably going to be somewhere in the lineup for the Detroit Tigers. It's just going to be either at third base or first base. It's not going to be in the outfield very much unless it has to be. injuries, somebody underperforms, something like that. The Tigers have 4 outfielders getting their time with a DH. Matt Vierling is the 5th outfielder. Let me repeat that for you people again. Okay? So, do I think Matt Vierling's going to be in the lineup when it comes to opening day 2025? Hell yeah, he's going to be somewhere.
But Matt Vierling had a better season than Wenceel Perez.
So what? So what? Who impacts winning more, Matt Vierling or Wenceel Perez with his bat? If you guys aren't paying attention, Wenceel Perez basically came off the DL with an oblique issue and immediately went in the lineup. Are you paying attention? Who did AJ Hinch give love to when we talked to him? Wenceel Perez. Who did Mike Ferrin say, man, I didn't know he was that good? Wenceel Perez. You guys aren't listening. If you aren't listening and not paying attention, can't help you. Smart baseball.
All right. Either way, fact of the matter, Jake Burger would make the Tigers a lot better in 2025. We both agree on that.
Correct.
Look, that's the other thing too, is 106 WRC plus in 2024. That would have ranked 3rd among Tigers players with at least 500 plate appearances, behind only Riley Green and Matt Vierling. His 106 WRC plus would have ranked 5th among Tigers with at least 250 plate appearances, behind Kerry Carpenter, Riley Green, Parker Meadows, and Matt Vierling. Spencer Torkelson had a 92 WRC plus. Gio Urshela had a 75 WRC plus. Jake Burger had a 106 WRC plus. Torkelson and Urshela, those guys were the primary first baseman and third baseman in 2024. Yes, Jake Burger makes your team a whole lot better, and he hits homers.
And he's cheap. And he is under team control. And he won't take a huge amount of trade assets to acquire. Sounds like a Scott Harris play to me. I don't know about you. Sounds like a Scott Harris play to me. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in 60. All right, we're back. We're going to discuss one of Evan Petzold and Mark Gorash's favorite things of 2024. And the question becomes, are the Tigers making a mistake by abandoning the pitching chaos strategy that helped them get in the playoffs and beyond? Thoughts?
So just in case anybody needs a reminder, which I'm sure they don't, but after the July 30th trade deadline, the Tigers implemented the opener bulk reliever pitching strategy, using relievers as openers and starters as bulk relievers. So basically, one pitcher would throw the first inning and sometimes the second inning, and then another pitcher, replicating the workload of a starter, would come out of the bullpen to take down the majority of the innings before the high leverage relievers handled the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings. The Tigers did this for 3 of every 5 games after the trade deadline, using only Tarek Skubal and Kader Montero as traditional starters. And guess what? They ranked first in MLB with a 2.91 ERA from the July 30th trade deadline through the September 29th season finale. With this strategy, the Tigers were the most unpredictable team in baseball. They got to the postseason, and it became known as pitching chaos. The openers were Bo Brisky, Tyler Holton, Alex Fido, and Brennan Hannafy. The bulk relievers were Brant Herter, Brian Sammons, Ty Madden, and Kenta Maeda. The Tigers had a 12-11 record in 23 games when using the opener bulk pitching strategy after the trade deadline. And then, of course, they also did it in the postseason. But that strategy is not going to continue in the 2025 season. The Tigers do always have that in their back pocket if they need to go to it. And they're confident in that. And the pitchers have experience doing that, and they're willing to accept those roles. But the Tigers are going to be much more open-minded to giving their bulk relievers traditional starter roles moving forward. Because remember, all of those guys were starters in AAA Toledo anyway. They were only bulk relievers in the big leagues for strategic and developmental reasons. As bulk relievers, the Tigers were able to pick the leadoff hitter for them, which created easier matchups for them to have success. As traditional starters, the opposing team gets to pick the leadoff hitter. Who bats first in the first inning? That's up to the opposing manager. But if you're bringing them out of the bullpen, well, then AJ Hinch gets to pick who the leadoff hitter is for that specific pitcher who's going to take down 5-6 innings. So I think the Tigers want to see Brant Herter as a starter or Ty Madden as a starter. Like, those are legit young players who have been starters for their entire lives. And what if they're able to be good starters in the big leagues, but the Tigers just never try? I think that's doing a disservice to the organization and to the player. And also, manager AJ Hinch has talked about this too. Like once the bullpen door opens, it never actually closes. So it seems like that's another big reason why the Tigers prefer to go back to a traditional 5-man rotation as opposed to continuing to do the opener bulk pitching strategy. They always could do it, but it's just not going to be a fit for them in 2025. And I like the fact that they're going back to the traditional roles. I think it adds value for players. Like Brant Hurter, as an individual player, becomes significantly more valuable as a starting pitcher as opposed to being a bulk reliever who takes down like 4 or 5, 6 innings in the middle of a game. Like the value of the player, it just changes dramatically. And so I think it's good for the players. I think it's good for the organization to find out what you have. But if you're ever in a pinch and you need, guys that take down those middle innings and you want to play pitching chaos, or next year the Tigers are in the playoffs and they're going to go back to pitching chaos, I could see that being the case. You're in the playoffs and you got to keep opposing teams off balance and you want to throw a couple pitching chaos games at them. Tigers have done that before. They are very comfortable with it. So I think there are two sides to it, but I ultimately think that it's good that they're going back to a traditional way of doing things with a 5-man rotation.
Well, so the answer to this question kind of reminds me of my mother-in-law, who was a gem of the world, Holocaust survivor. She used to say a lot of funny things. And she used to say, good intentions are good intentions. And what she meant is that, you can have a plan, but, as soon as the plan doesn't seem to be working, you're going to go away from the plan. So as far as the pitching chaos goes, I think the Tigers' intentions to start the 2025 season is to go back to a more traditional methodology of a starting rotation. I think they've been doing it this way for 100+ years. And yes, they adapted a strategy and optimized a bunch of pitchers. But let's not forget exactly what you said. When these guys came into the game, especially for the first, probably 45 days of the strategy, the bulk guy was throwing, somewhere between 13 and 16 outs. So essentially he was a starting pitcher just being used second after they tried to set the lineup up to his advantage because they were concerned that who they were using was not the highest caliber talent starting pitcher. And so they wanted to try and create a circumstance where he had the best chance to succeed. Do I think they're going to start the season with that in 2025? Absolutely not. Could I see them going to that after the All-Star break or maybe in the last 10 weeks of the season if they think it will work for them and help them win more baseball games? 100%. Do I think as a 2025 full season philosophy that that's going to be how they approach the season? Absolutely not. So it worked really well. It was kind of a novelty. And ask yourself, why has it never really been used before besides Tampa Bay? And it's never really been used for an entire season because the likelihood of it working well for 162 games is pretty meager. And, like I said, I could see them going to it at the end of the year. I just doubt that it's a season-long priority. So it'll be interesting to see how they do it, but it does speak a lot to the idea that the Tigers are willing to be unconventional and do whatever they need to do to win. So let's transition into discussing a little bit about their starting rotation. Scott Harris said to you that Kenta Maeda is in the mix for the starting rotation in 2025. And my answer to that is, why would he say anything else? I mean, do I believe it? Probably not. And things would be really bad or things would be shockingly good, to be honest with you. Because, look, Kenta Maeda was a pretty damn good starter before he decided to age before our eyes. But what do you think about the idea that Kenta Maeda is in the mix for the starting rotation in 2025, Ev?
Yeah, I'm not surprised Scott Harris said that. I mean, he also said that Matt Manning was going to be in the mix for a spot on the opening day roster in the starting rotation. And maybe you say that about Matt Manning because trade value could be on the line. Kenta Maeda, there's no trade value there. So I was curious if he would say, no, we really liked Kenta Maeda out of the bullpen. He actually performed very well. We'd love to have him as a long reliever. But Kenta Maeda is going to be in the mix for the starting rotation in 2025. That's the plan. I do believe it. I do think that there is a world in which Kenta Maeda rebounds and is a part of the rotation in 2025. I think there's maybe even a little part of the Tigers that are counting on that to be the case. Obviously, there are a million other options because they have a lot of pitching depth, but I think there's a part of them that, is kind of banking on Kenta Maeda making some significant changes this offseason, showing up to spring training and being better in 2025 than he was in 2024, because it was a disastrous 2024. He had career worst in ERA, strikeout rate, whiff rate. I mean, it was a 6.09 ERA. The Tigers signed him to a 2-year, $24 million contract last offseason, and it just hasn't worked out. He made $14 million in 2024. He's owed $10 million in 2025. But Maeda did get a lot better when the Tigers moved him from the rotation to the bullpen in early July. His walk rate went down. His strikeout rate went up. His overall performance improved. He had a 7.42 ERA as a starter, and then he had a 3.86 ERA as a reliever. His fastball velocity also ticked up in each month of the season, all the way up to 91.8 miles an hour in September. The big question is going to be what happens in the offseason, because the Tigers had changed Kenta Maeda's offseason program in search of better performance, specifically better performance as a starter. He threw just one bullpen in Japan before reporting to spring training in 2024. I would expect him to throw multiple bullpens before pitchers and catchers report to spring training in mid-February 2025. I think he's really in the mix, but it all depends on what he looks like on day one of spring training.
I think a couple things are for sure true. One, they've absolutely revamped his off-season training program. He came to spring training in the start of the year totally unprepared physically for what happens to players when they age. He was not ready, and his stuff was not ready to be a major league contributor. And they're going to do everything they can with $10 million invested in him to try to change that. Okay. If he does change it and he's throwing 91 to 93 and his split's better, Kenta Maeda can be really, really good when that happens. He's shown over the length of his career that can happen. But do I think it will happen? Well, I'll put it this way. I think there's a 50% chance that Kenta Maeda has a big comeback season for the Tigers. I think there's a 50% chance they cut him before the season starts. So it's one or the other. And we're going to find out what that is. I want to talk a little bit about, though, what you think going into next year, the starting rotation is going to look like. I think we have two absolute guarantees, which is Tarik Skubal and Reese Olson. And then we have a lot of guesswork. So let's assume that we have two for sure things, 100% for sure things, Reese Olson and Tarik Skubal. Then I want you to give me a percentage on what comes after. So third spot in the rotate. Let me hear who you think 3, 4, 5 is going to be, and let's assume one of those spots is a signee. Okay, so share with me the Evan Petzold thoughts on how we're going to flesh out the rotation.
Yeah, so Tarik Skubal and Reese Olson, obviously those guys are locks. I think Jackson Jobe is actually as close to a lock as he possibly could be. He just needs to have a good spring training. I don't think, if you're the Tigers, if you preach allocating innings and at-bats to young players, you can't have Jackson Jobe pitching for you in the postseason and then sending him back to AAA Toledo to start the 2025 season. Like, you've got to get off to a fast start. Jackson Jobe's got good stuff. As long as he has a good spring training, I think he's in that starting rotation. I don't know if you count on him to be like a number 2 right next to Skubal from the onset. Like, this guy's going to have to learn and develop and grow. But I do think he deserves to learn, develop, and grow in the big leagues, considering he's already pitched in the big leagues in the postseason. So I think Jackson Jobe is as close to a lock as you can get. And then free agent signing, for sure, they need to add a pitcher. Probably a guy in a 1-year deal. I've heard they want to do that again, like they did with Michael Lorenzen, like they did with Jack Flaherty. I like Walker Buehler and Frankie Montas. Those are my favorites in free agency. I actually like Montas more than Buehler. We'll talk about free agent pitchers more maybe on next week's episode, assuming the Tigers don't sign someone before then. But, it'd be a 1-year deal type starter. Walker Buehler, Frankie Montas. Those are two guys that I like. Like Montas more than Buehler, but we'll get into that. But then fifth starter, you got so many different options. You can go Brant Herter or Casey Mize, Kader Montero, Kenta Maeda, Matt Manning, Ty Madden. For now, I'll take Kenta Maeda because the Tigers have $10 million committed to him, and he's actually a really good starter when he's right. But I think it could easily be Brant Herter if Maeda doesn't make improvements over the offseason. Like, Kenta Maeda did have a 3.36 ERA in his final 17 games in 2023 with the Minnesota Twins. I also think Matt Manning will be a reliever at some point in the future, but the Tigers are bringing him and everyone else to spring training as a starting pitcher. And Mark, I don't mean to break your heart, but I don't think Kader Montero is that good of a starting pitcher. I have a million reasons why. I can explain those to you, but that's where I'm at right now. My early projection, Tarek Skubal, Reese Olson, Jackson Jobe, Frankie Montas, and Kenta Maeda in the MLB starting rotation, and then some combination of Brant Herter, Kader Montero, Casey Mize, Matt Manning, Ty Madden, and Troy Melton in the AAA Toledo starting rotation. And let's not forget about Sawyer Gipson-Long, who missed the entire 2024 season. He's coming back from elbow surgery and hip surgery, probably won't be ready for opening day, but he was one of the first players to take advice from the Scott Harris version of the pitching department, make changes in the minor leagues, and then implement those changes in big league games. And after he did that, he had success in the big leagues in September 2023. He could be an option in 2025, but just not right out of the gate. But don't forget about Sawyer Gipson-Long.
All right, Sawyer Gipson-Long's going to have to put together 6 to 10 starts in AAA before he's even on the radar of being promoted. He's not making the team out of spring training. I think both of us know that. Jackson Jobe, percentage starting the year in the rotation, I'd put it at 80%. I also would not diminish the chance that Scott Harris manipulates his service time, sends him to Toledo for 3 starts, and then recalls him so he gets an extra year out of him, because that's really a Detroit Tigers thing to do. And I think ignoring that possibility is foolish. All right. I think Kader Montero is a lock for the rotation unless he absolutely is horrendous in spring training.
Yeah, I disagree completely.
Well, I think Kader Montero was really good for the last 7 weeks of the season. He's adding a changeup. His fastball command improved a ton, and he reminds me a ton of the end of the year Reese Olson 2023. And I think he's probably, 90% likely to be in the rotation in 2025 unless he's really terrible in spring training. I think Matt Manning will not be part of the Tigers organization after the winter. And I think Casey Mize is far more a trade piece than people think, especially when you're starting to look at guys like Jake Berger and other types of players. So, I'm not really, I would say the chance that either one of them are in the rotation is less than 50%. I think Brant Herter, less than 50%. I think they optimized him. I think he will get starts in 2025. I just don't see him breaking camp. Walker Buehler, probably at the top of my list. Just don't know if the Tigers are willing to spend the money, because you and I both know he's going to need at least the amount of money that the qualifying offer is to sign a 1-year deal. So are the Tigers going to spend $20 million on a starting pitcher on a 1-year deal?
If they think they can fix him, yes. And I think 1 year, $22 million for Walker Buehler makes a ton of sense. You got no player option to worry about. You got no team option to worry about. Give him a straight 1-year deal where $22 million is just a tick above what the qualifying offer was. And if you think you can fix him, I think you go out and you get him no matter what the cost is. They've proven they can do this time and time again with Michael Lorenzen. And then they spent a little bit more to go get Jack Flaherty. So now it's time maybe to spend a little bit more and go get Walker Buehler, fix him, and then at the deadline, trade him and get young prospects. Scott Harris talked about that, but he likes that strategy regardless of being able to acquire somebody, fix them, and then trade them for young players. Because, and this is Scott Harris's words, right? Like, we live in a world in which there is no free agent market for young players. Like, young 22-year-olds are not on the free agent market. And so if you can go get a 22-year-old at the trade deadline, go get him, add him to your organization, because there's value in that. I like the idea, and I think if the Tigers think they can fix him, or if they think they can fix a Frankie Montas, go get him. But I do want to take a second, and I want to say, what I think about Kader Montero, because I just don't think he's that good of a starting pitcher. And we don't see eye to eye on this, and that's fine. But he had a 4.76 ERA with a 7.5% walk rate and an 18.7% strikeout rate, all below average. Expected ERA was 5.13. That ranked in the 7th percentile. His chase rate, whiff rate, and strikeout rates, they were all at or below the 25th percentile. Now, he did have a 3.77 ERA in September. But if you remove the 9 scoreless innings against the Colorado Rockies, he had a 5.49 ERA in his other September games. Without the Rockies game, his season-long ERA would be 5.24, not 4.76. And that ERA is much more aligned with his expected ERA of 5.13. So I think Montero is more of a 5 ERA pitcher than a 4 ERA pitcher. Also, he gave up 19 home runs in 98 and a third innings. Nearly 5% of all plate appearances were home runs. So I'm not all in on Thayron Montero yet. I think he needs way more time to develop. I do not think he's remotely close to what Reese Olson was at the end of the 2023 season. I think he's got a long ways to go before he gets there. I mean, Reese Olson had like 2+ secondaries and just needed to find a way to hide his fastball a little bit better. I mean, like, what does Thayron Montero actually have? Like, what does he actually have that's like a plus pitch? I don't think he has any plus pitches in his arsenal, whereas Reese Olson had 2+ pitches. It was the slider, it was the changeup, and obviously we know he just needed to figure out the fastball location. Montero, I think he is many, many steps behind, what Reese Olson was when Reese Olson was coming into form.
All I'll say to you is, in the 2023 season, you go back and look at the first 10 starts of Reese Olson, his ERA was over 4.70.
But they're not the same pitcher.
And he gave up a ton of home runs. So when you start talking about giving up home runs and having a high ERA, Reese Olson was that guy. So lastly, I want to ask you real quickly, chances the Tigers would actually discuss bringing back Jack Flaherty. Good chance or almost zero chance?
I think I don't want to say almost zero chance. I think there's a chance. I mean, I know the Tigers like Jack Flaherty. They really enjoyed being with Jack Flaherty, working with him, making some changes, and watching him have so much success. It was really impressive what he was able to do. The Tigers love Jack Flaherty in ways that they do not love Eduardo Rodriguez, for example. So never say never, because there is a really good relationship between Flaherty and the Tigers. But again, Flaherty's probably looking for a 3-year deal or a 4-year deal. I'm not so sure that's what the Tigers are looking to do at this point.
I think we just had to address it. I think it's not impossible. I think the chances are small. All right, we're going to go to our last break. We'll be back. All right, the Free Press published a poll. I see over 4,000 people voted about the Tigers. Kind of walk us through it and tell us what it told us.
So the question of the poll was one big move you'd want to see the Tigers make this offseason. And the choices were sign Justin Verlander, sign Alex Bregman, trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., sign Corbin Burns, sign Pete Alonso, sign Anthony Santander, sign Max Scherzer. Those were the options. Mark, more than 30% of people said sign Justin Verlander, and that was the winner of the poll. The winner of the poll was sign Justin Verlander. Verlander, 30%. Alex Bregman, 25%. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., 20%. Corbin Burns, 10%. Pete Alonso, 6%. Anthony Santander, 3%. Max Scherzer, 2%. Justin Verlander was the winner at 30%. He got 1,260 votes of the 4,144 votes in the poll. Are people crazy?
You know what they say? There's an old saying by front office people that if you listen to the fans, you're going to end up shortly sitting with the fans.
Justin Verlander just had a 5.48 ERA and he turned 42 on February 20th.
Well, I get it. And after the Detroit Tigers do every single thing this offseason, if they want to get Justin Verlander to accept the $5 million contract to do his last season in the major leagues as a Detroit Tiger, I'll give him a big hug when he gets here. But come on, I can't take it.
No, but I do think that is an interesting point, though. Like, when it does come to Verlander, like, I don't think that a Verlander Tigers reunion is likely. I don't think it happens. Not unless Verlander is willing to take like a dirt cheap 1-year contract. But at that point, like, you might as well just retire, right? Unless he wants to do it for sentimental value, but then are you really doing it for the right reasons? If he knows there isn't any gas left in the tank, like, he probably should hang it up. Like, that's probably where we're at this point right now with Justin Verlander in his career. Hall of Fame career, no doubt. But if there isn't any gas left, then let's call it good.
Well, I'll explain it to you this way. My mother's 86 and a half years old. She has a 1999 Mercedes CLK convertible. It's got a few rust spots. It's got less than 100,000 miles. It works great, but it isn't a car you would drive all the time if you weren't 86 and a half years old. You might drive it a few times, especially if you refurbished it. Justin Verlander, he's a 1999 Mercedes CLK. You can't drive him all the time anymore. I think he can still really pitch. I just don't think he can pitch every 5 days and hold up for an entire season anymore. Justin Verlander has, well over 2,000 innings on his arm. He's been getting injured pretty frequently in the last 5 years. And that is the risk you take. Justin Verlander is not somebody that's going to put up 25 to 30 starts. He's going to put up 12 to 20 starts. And if your idea is to not pitch him very much early in the year and then hope that in August and September in the playoffs he can help you, yeah, that might be a strategy. You're not going to pay a lot of money for it. And I don't think Justin's going to be real happy if that's what you explained to him that you wanted to do with him. He's got 68 wins. He wants to get 32 more wins to get to 300. And I would say the chances of that happening are less than 5%. So, I think that's enough discussion about Justin Verlander. We love him, but reality is reality. All right. So the Tigers may have their first Silver Slugger winner since Miguel Cabrera in 2016. What's the chances that happens? And tell us who that would be.
Yeah, so Riley Green got snubbed from the Gold Glove finalist voting, but he is a finalist for the Silver Slugger. There are 5 finalists from the American League in the outfield. It's Riley Green from the Detroit Tigers, of course, Jarren Duran from the Boston Red Sox, Aaron Judge from the New York Yankees, Anthony Santander from the Baltimore Orioles, and Juan Soto from the Yankees. It's going to be tough for Riley Green to win, but if you take a peek at the 5 finalists in the outfield, Riley Green ranks pretty well. He ranks 5th in games, 5th in plate appearances, 4th in batting average, 3rd in on-base percentage, 5th in slugging percentage, 4th in OPS, 4th in home runs, 4th in doubles, 2nd in triples, 3rd in walk rate, and 5th in strikeout rate. As for total offense, he ranks 3rd of the 5 finalists in the outfield with a 135 WRC+. So if 3 win of the 5 finalists, I think Riley Green has a good chance. He probably is going to end up somewhere 3rd or 4th. I don't think he finishes 5th. But if he's 3rd, he's going to be a Silver Slugger Award winner. Got to tip the cap also to Colt Keith, 4 finalists at second base. He was in that mix as well, along with Jose Altuve of the Houston Astros, Marcus Semien of the Texas Rangers, and Gleyber Torres of the New York Yankees. There were actually only 6 qualified second basemen for the entire 2024 season. So that's why Colt Keith was one of 4 finalists for Silver Slugger, because there were only 6 qualified second basemen. As for Silver Slugger in the outfield, there were 23 qualified outfielders and then 5 finalists, including Riley Green. So hat tip to both Colt Keith and Riley Green. But Colt Keith, not as likely. Riley Green, maybe likely. Maybe he's got a chance to be a Silver Slugger winner. First time since Miguel Cabrera in 2016. That'd be pretty cool.
I think he's got a shot. I just don't think his profile is high enough to win. But I think he's got a shot. And let's be really honest. At this point in time, I kind of like the idea that Riley Green gets close and falls short, because I think it's the kind of stuff that motivates him. So there's a lot more in that Riley Green tank, and anything they can do to increase his level of motivation going seasons forward. I think we haven't hit the ceiling, and I'm all in on motivating Riley Green to hit the ceiling, because it's a pretty exciting ceiling. All right. Thayron Liranzo hit a game-winning homer Saturday night off of McGeary on a 96-mile-an-hour fastball. The ball still hasn't landed, went 437 feet. Everybody got really, really excited about it. In the Arizona Fall Stars All-Star game, Jose Briseño also was in the home run derby. Didn't do much, but Briseño, of course, does lead the league in home runs, so it's much more impressive when you hit him in the game than in a glorified batting practice. Let's talk about Arizona Fall League performance, exceptional performance. What's it mean? Does it mean anything? We've talked to a few people about the AFL and how the ball flies and what's going on out there. So talk about Liranzo as homer and talk about Bregman. Let's talk a little bit about Jake Miller too. So tell us what you think.
Yeah, so the home run was great, right? Like that moment was awesome and good for Liranzo. I mean, everyone likes to come up in a big moment like that, and you'd rather see a guy, get the job done as opposed to not. But like he crushed that ball, and that went a long ways, a long ways. It was really impressive. As for performance, when it comes to hitters, I like to take a look at what are the ERAs of each individual team in the Arizona Fall League, and the best ERA of all the 6 teams in the Fall League, it's the Scottsdale Scorpions with a 5.11 team ERA. Then you have Surprise Saguaros, 5.25 ERA. The Salt River Rafters, a 5.68 ERA. The Mesa Solar Sox, 5.93 ERA. The Glendale Desert Dogs, 6.19 team ERA. And the Peoria Javelinas, 7.47 ERA. So all these ERAs are sky high. So a lot of teams are giving up a lot of runs. But when you're looking at it from a performance standpoint, like for the Tigers, you rather have the players who are performing as the players who aren't. Like if a lot of players are performing very well on offense, I'd rather have the guys at the very top as opposed to the guys that are in the middle. And Josue Bregman and Thayron Liranzo, they have been at the very top. They both have over 1,000 OPS. They're both hitting over 300. And they both made their mark on the Arizona Fall League. It's good things for them. I think it's good that they're getting these kind of opportunities, especially, being able to do things like the Home Run Derby and to do things like the Fall Stars game. Like, again, in the big picture, are those really that big of a deal? No. But they're big stage moments that in the moment, like those guys want to perform well in those situations. And so I think it's good for them. And obviously it's good to see them have the kind of performance that they've been able to have.
First of all, I love the idea that both Bregman and Liranzo, who finished the year at high A, and they used to have exceptions when you played in high A to play in the AFL. I'm not sure they have that anymore, just to give you an idea of the evolution of the Arizona Fall League. But they're facing a caliber of pitching that's probably better in a lot of ways, especially at the start of games, that they saw, in the minor leagues this year. So it's a really good test for them to try to face better competition. Both obviously, Bregman probably starts the year at West Michigan. Liranzo, almost a guarantee, is going to start the year at AA. But yeah, it's great. Okay. Jake Miller also been really, really good in the AFL and kind of stamped himself as a legitimate prospect. We don't know if he's a reliever or starter yet. But yeah, you should be excited about those guys. Do I think it says anything that, Liranzo hit a 437-foot homer in the AFL All-Star game? Nah, not a lot. We all know he has power, and that's a good thing. Still needs to improve his catching. He'll get a year to do that next year. All right, it's been a fun show. We've covered a lot of stuff. I think next week we'll start moving into who we're going to target in free agency or maybe some trades. Maybe something will happen. I kind of doubt it. But, anybody that wants or has a topic or some players they want us to discuss next week when we're talking about our wish lists, hit us up, send an email to Av or, hit us up on X, do whatever you need to do. It's time for us to get out of here. So I'd like to remind everybody to rate, share, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. We know where those places are: Apple, Spotify, Amazon. You can find us, of course, always embedded in every Evan Petzold article at thefreep.com. He had a lot of really good ones. He had one about his talks with Scott Harris today. I'd like to thank the editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, our producer, the man who saves us every week, Robin the Magic Man Chan. Love them, a grandson, the spectacular Braden Michael Gorash. Shout out to Savannah Petzold. Until next week, peace.